What's up, everybody? It's Jason Cruz here once again with another episode of The Legal Submission. But before we start, I want to make sure that you like and subscribe to this video and the YouTube channel, The Legal Submission, as we will be uploading more and more stuff in the weeks to come in the field of combat sports law. Now, in today's edition, we're going to be talking about what's going on in the Terence Crawford versus Top Rank Boxing lawsuit. And basically what we got now is a response from Top Rank Boxing, which removed the case, which was filed in Las Vegas, Nevada State Superior Court, and moved it to federal court in the state of Nevada. What usually happens in these particular cases is that if a case is filed in state court, a party may has an opportunity to remove it to federal court. This is called a notice of removal, and basically the party that's moving the case to federal court does it because there is a issue that federal law trumps over the state court law. And here we have an instance where Top Rank indicates that the case should be moved to federal court for diversity jurisdiction reasons. And what that basically means is that since Terence Crawford is a resident of the state of Nebraska and Top Rank Boxing is a corporation located in Nevada, Las Vegas, where its central business is located, the case must be filed in federal court. This is based on the fact that when you have two parties that are in differing jurisdictions here, Crawford is resident in Nebraska, and Top Rank's a resident of what you would say is a resident of the state of Nevada. You have diversity, and the federal court would have the option to take the jurisdiction issue over the case. So Terence Crawford and his attorneys decided to file a motion for remand to state court. The motion for remand requires that the federal court allow the party that's requesting the remand to move the case back to state court. Now, why would these things happen? Why would you want to move a case from state court to federal court, or why would you remove a case from federal court to state court? Well, there's a couple of reasons why. First of all, to keep the case in state court, the state rules are a little more lax in terms of discovery and motions and things of that nature, whereas federal courts are a little more rigid in their rules and construction. The state courts have their own local rules with respect to discovery, motions, things of that nature. Federal court is, again, much more structured in terms of hard and fast deadlines and related to that. In terms of costs, federal court probably is a little more costlier, if that's the word, costs more with respect to litigating a particular case. State court, though, you would probably have the opportunity to get your case in front of a jury faster. As we've seen from the UFC antitrust lawsuit, things in federal court tend to back up extremely long. And so perhaps what Terence Crawford is doing is hoping to get the state court issues done in an expeditious manner so they could be more efficient with the litigation budget that he'd have to deal with, as well as get the case to a decision point where parties will go to trial or perhaps settle the case before short of trial. But with federal court, the process is a little longer as far as the time to wait for a trial. Now, the reason why Terence Crawford wants to remand this case back to state court is the belief that the parties to the lawsuit would be benefited more from that particular move. Contingent wants to move this case back to state court is based on something called snap removal. And now this is a particular mechanism that certain parties use, which it basically moves the case to federal court, not back to. It's an automatic mechanism in which a party moves the case to a federal court. Once it identifies particular issues it could raise with respect to the jurisdiction of the federal court. Now, the snap removal is like you would envision it being a snap of the fingers, that a party just does it without even looking at the merits of the case. And here, Terence Crawford states that Top Rank moved the case to federal court without even being served the lawsuit. Is that a big question? I mean, is that a big issue? Well, Terence Crawford's legal counsel is making it a big issue for the fact that the defendant here, Top Rank, didn't even evaluate the lawsuit before making the unilateral move to move the case to federal court. Now, one of the things that people may not know is that the notice of removal under the federal rules is an automatic act. Once there's an issue once the party makes an issue that relates to why a federal court should have the jurisdiction, it has the jurisdiction. So basically, federal courts overarch the jurisdiction of state courts, as you probably would know. And so from that perspective, Crawford's legal team argues that, hey, they're just making this snap judgment based on the fact that there may be one or more federal issues that would pertain and have the federal court retain jurisdiction. The argument posed by Terence Crawford in their motion for remand that it was that Top Rank is a forum defendant, and according to the definition, removal based on diversity is subject to the forum defendant rule. And the forum defendant rule states that a civil action otherwise removable solely on the basis of the jurisdiction of this title may not be removed if any of the parties in interest properly joined and served as defendants is a citizen of the state in which such action is brought. So, what does that legalese mean? It means that if you are a forum defendant, that you are what does that mean? That means that Top Rank admits that it is a resident for civil procedure standards, a resident of the state of Nevada. It's located in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's registered as a corporation in Nevada, and that's where it does its primary business, Nevada. So the fact of the matter is that since Terence Crawford sued Top Rank in the state court of Nevada, that the case should stay in the state of Nevada. The law that Terence Crawford's attorneys point to is an argument that if you remove based on diversity jurisdiction, meaning two different states. So Terence Crawford, Nevada, Top Rank, Nevada. Terence Crawford, Nebraska, Top Rank, Nevada. If you remove based on diversity, it's still subject to the fact that if the defendant is a forum defendant, is located in the state where the lawsuit occurs, then diversity jurisdiction does not trump the forum defendant issue. So basically, since Terence Crawford filed a lawsuit in Nevada where Top Rank is located, Top Rank must find another reason why the case should be removed from state court where it resides to the federal court. And so the other thing that Terence Crawford takes issue with is the improper snap removal tactic. And I had explained that to you guys a little bit earlier, but basically they argue that Top Rank filed its removal notice a mere 3 days after Mr. Crawford filed its complaint and prior to it having been served with a summons and complaint. And according to the papers, this litigation tactic of attempting to remove actions from state court as quickly as possible before a plaintiff has had an opportunity to effectuate service has become increasingly popular in recent years, due in part to the increased use of electronic docketing monitoring. So here we have Terence Crawford making the policy argument behind the law that a petition for removal was done as gamesmanship. Basically, it was done automatically without even looking at the particulars of the lawsuit. So the so-called snap removal strategy is precisely what Top Rank employed in this case, removing 3 days after Mr. Crawford filed his complaint in state court. And so they argue that it's contrary to the law of the law of the Ninth Circuit, which Nevada is based in, and other holdings throughout the United States. Now, Top Rank argues in its motion opposing the remand that Terence Crawford held on to the lawsuit, that Top Rank was not monitoring the court doc system from lawsuits by Crawford or anyone else, and Top Rank learned about the complaint when the New York Post emailed it to Bob Arum requesting comment. So that was the first time they even heard of the lawsuit. They were not served the lawsuit, and the fact of the matter was they didn't receive it until a reporter from the New York Post posted the article wanting comment from Bob Arum. Now, of course, the big thing with this particular lawsuit is not the fact that there was a breach of contract and Terence Crawford wasn't wasn't given the amount of fights he was supposed to in a year, or was not given the actual fight with Errol Spence that he wanted, but in the fact he was stating that Bob Arum is a racist. And so that was a salacious part of the New York Post story. So here they state that there was no gamesmanship, there's no prejudice to Crawford, and the fact of the matter is that the case should still remain in federal court. So what about the question of the forum defendant? Something that was brought up by Terence Crawford in his motion for remand back to state court. Now, again, the forum defendant is the defendant that is in that particular state and claims removal on the sole argument that there's diversity jurisdiction. Well, interesting enough, Top Rank cites several cases which recognizes that where they proclaim still a statutory right to removal. So multiple circuit courts have recognized removal by a forum defendant who had been sued but not served, relying on a plain language interpretation of the statute's text. So here again, we get into a little bit more of the granular statutory interpretation of the rules of civil procedure, and we won't go into them too deeply, simply because I know no one really wants to get into it. But basically, what the argument is that a plain language interpretation of the statute would indicate that removal is still should be granted regardless of this forum defendant argument on the part of Terence Crawford. Now, what's interesting to me in the opposing papers of Top Rank is that they are pointing out specific cases where the court is granting removal to the federal court in light of opposition from the other party remanding the case back to state court. And so what I myself gather from this is that Top Rank is making a specific argument based to Crawford's rebuttal about the forum defendants. And the fact of the matter is, it seems from the fact that they're pulling cases that the court are have not decided yet fully on what to do about the forum defendant issue. What does that actually mean? That means that the court could be persuaded by Terence Crawford to keep the case in state court based on this forum defendant issue, but Top Rank is making it more persuasive to keep the status quo of keeping the removal petition alive and more of an automatic thing, rather than have the court be persuaded by Terence Crawford's arguments. So what does that particularly mean? We should know perhaps in the next month or so where the case goes. Now, it could be that Crawford gets this case back to state court based on a couple issues. One, the forum defendant issue, and two, there's this maybe a concern about the snap removal, this gamesmanship type issue, which Crawford points out. It could be that they keep it in state court. Top Rank's made the argument that if they move it to federal court, Crawford wouldn't really be harmed because he was suing in Nevada anyway. We're just moving across the street, so to speak, that they're going to be litigating in federal court, not state court. So this isn't an issue where he's suing in Nebraska state court and it gets removed to Nebraska. He's not, and gets moved to Nevada. We're not talking about this particular issue. It's clear that Crawford has availed himself to litigate the case in the state of Nevada, and it's just a matter of federal versus state law. So hopefully that kind of breaks it down to you as to why this is taking a little longer than normal. It's clear from the papers here that Top Rank's going to file a motion to dismiss regardless. There was some indications that the parties had been talking about doing this prior to this civil procedure issue. But again, there's some issues regarding whether that's going to be filed in federal and state court and how that would play out dependent on what court it lands in. So once again, this is Jason Cruz with the Legal Submission. Go ahead, subscribe to the Legal Submission, and check out MMA Payout. We'll talk to you later. Have a great day.